Salam, good people. Once again, this is Isaac Mirore in our epic journey of the African history. In this episode, we continue from where we left at last time, and we left at a very local note where I was trying to explain in the inspiration from the Shang Dynasty of China that has inspired the name back to Kenya amongst the youths who have encoded their own language that they speak among themselves, and whenever they want to decode messages in the presence of parents and other elderly people of the society. And the Shang Dynasty, which is, suffice to say, formed the first civilization of the Chinese people, and that civilization was inspired by Africans. And in this regard, these Africans were called the Na-Ki, N-A-K-I, which Na meant black and Ki meant human. So these black human beings, like me and others, formed that part of the dynasty that brought the first civilization. And as we all know, China formed the first nation in the world along the Yellow River, and Africans are known to have been the first people to form the first dynasties. Even civilization, though this civilization were never propagated to the rest of the world in a subjugative manner. So I would like us in this episode to look at the African kingdoms, and in this regard I would want to limit myself in the region that has been termed as Sub-Saharan Africa. I will not mention the Berber kingdom, I will not mention the Tuareg kingdom, probably just to touch on a few of them as we get along, and I'll also leave the Egyptian 30 dynasties for another episode, because these are broad dynasties, and especially the Egyptian one, and it was able to be preserved because the Egyptian dynasties have always had members of the Egyptian society migrate southwards through Nubia and through Puntland, and to some areas down in southern Africa. So this is how the people who moved were able to preserve, and the people who remained when Egypt became more and more cosmopolitan, and especially during the dynasty or the conquest of Alexander, who is called among the Europeans the Great. Around 200,000 BCE, Africans had dynasties, and among the Alkebulan dynasties that I'm going to mention is the Wagadu. Wagadu is famous, which is among the Mande people, and the Wagadu was a vast dynasty in terms of geographical jurisdiction, and it comprised of the parts of Libya, southeastern Mali. It also comprised the Akan people, and the people in Mali, and some other kingdoms like the Akan, the Ife, which is among the Togolese and the Benin people, and also the Mauritanian people, the Senegalese, the Guineans, and the Western Saharan people. Um, this kingdom was very vast, but also along the way it broke into several kingdoms. Um, like the Ife kingdom became autonomous, and the Akan kingdom. There were other kingdoms in Nigeria, the Nok kingdom, and this was before the geographical boundaries of Nigeria as we know them, that were crafted by the Europeans in 1895. The Nok kingdom was different from the Hausa. And as you know today, the Nok and the houses are within the same geographical boundaries. But the houses were mainly in the Niger region. The Sara kingdom, which is Sara, was a kingdom that formed largely what we know as Chad. We also had the Tubu kingdom, which formed much of what is the Saharan desert. And by this time, the Sahara was not yet a desert. It became a desert some few hundred years ago because of the human activities. Like we said in some past episodes of this journey, there was a trade route that went all the way through West Africa to the Atlantic Ocean, and back through East Africa, and back through the north, and through the Alexandrian Nile corridor. And so there has been very many kingdoms, like for example the Egyptian one, which was called the Kemet kingdom. And this is actually the original name of the Egyptians. The Jews in the Bible call them or call Egypt Mizraim, which according to them they have their own experience, and they have their own reasons of giving them that name. But the original name of the Egyptians is neither Egypt nor Misri, which as we call it today in Swahili. These are late names, but the original name was Kemet. So they had their own kingdom. The Sudanese people had the very famous kingdom of Kush, which is adversely mentioned in the Masoretic text, if you like, the Old Testament. We also had the Twa kingdom. The Twa kingdom was part of Libya. And Libya was not as vast in its geographical boundaries as it is today. So it was just a small area, but touching on the Mediterranean and beckoning at southwest Europe. There was the Zaire kingdom. The Twa really was big because it comprises of what we call Central African Republic today, Eastern Cameroon, and some areas of Congo, especially both Congo, the Brazzaville one, and the Zaire one. And I think this was the vast kingdom by the time King Leopold the second of Belgium was visiting Africa for the first time in the 14th century CE. Their people were able to testify to this fact, and this was one of the main reasons why slavery began in this region. It also comprised some part of Angola. The people in this region had several kingdoms, but there was one central kingdom And this is the kingdom that was lured into selling its own people for the gains of um, the royals and the cronies, and if you like, in the European words, they are aristocrats. Um, this was the beginning of the breaking down of the African kingdoms and African governance, African social fabric, African ideology, African culture, and African political and economic activities, as it were. And so, moving on to another great kingdom, this is a this I think is the second to Kemetic kingdom. This is the Puntland kingdom, which comprised part of Kush. It began from Kush in Sudan under the Nubian kingdom, and it spread towards Egypt. At one point, they colonized Egypt, but it was not a form of colony as we were experienced or subjected to by the Europeans. They conquered the Kemet, and they conquered also the Assyrians on the other side of the Red Sea. But they also rebuilt, and this is the new military tactics and remedy that are employed today by the global military under the UN Charter and statutes, that whenever you wage a war, you also rebuild back. So this was done very many years ago by Africans when the Nubians took over the Kemetic kingdom, and they formed several dynasties before even the formation of the nation of Israel. They rebuilt all these places and they reverted back. Very many centuries later, they reverted back to Sudan, and they started moving downwards to what I'm calling Puntland, which comprises Uganda, Tanzania, East Democratic Republic, some parts of actually the whole part of Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somali. And it moved all the way to the East African coast, which is known for global trade, even way back before the conquest of Alexander, who is called the Great in Europe. People have done business in East Africa, including the Chinese, including people of the Roman Empire, and so on and so forth, and the Arabs. So the Puntland continues to grew all the way to some parts of southern Africa, and especially the Mozambican coast, including Rwanda and Burundi, and some part of Congo. And then there was a kingdom called Himba, the Himba kingdom in southern Angola, and it also stretched west of Malawi, and this is a very important kingdom, together with the what is called the Mwaringuni, the Mwaringuni kingdom, which we find very important kingdoms like the Zulu kingdom. We find other kingdoms that formed part of the Great Zimbabwean Wall, and one that is very important to me and my scholarship is the Mapungwe kingdom that was whose information has been hidden by the minority government of South Africa all this while, and even trying to change the history from it being an African history, because there were traces of gold and sculptures made from gold, and the usage of gold adversely than in any other part in Southern Africa and Eastern Africa. But they wanted to make this history part of the Kemet who visited all this region, or some ancient Arabs who were on the business expedition in Africa through trade routes. This is very important to my research. And these Mwari Anguni kingdom formed part of eastern South Africa, like the Lesotho, like the Eswatini, Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. So these are what were changed later into the 53 countries in the scramble for Africa by Western Europeans. And suffice to say that a lot of these kingdoms were not able to read into this malice then, because of the hospitality nature of Africans and the lack of hatred towards different people. White people were not new to us, because among Africans they give birth to even albinos, so they were just part of the bigger societies, only that they came in large numbers, but it was not a surprise. So thank you so much for journeying with me through this journey. It is becoming our own journey, knowing yourself, knowing your roots, and like a wise man said from Jamaica, if you don't know your roots, you can never know the kind of fruits you're supposed to bear. So be good and be African always.